Hi, my name is Marian Kirkpatrick. I am a Baroness of the Court of Ivan and Mathilde, and this is.
I'm Perronnelle de Fry, Maîtresse, Mistress of the Pelican, of Mohammed and Korotica. And we are running for the coronets of Bergenthal as the second pair that is going to be an option for you. I have been in the SCA for over 2 decades at this point, and started when I was about 12 years old.
I have also been involved with the SCA in some capacity over the last 10 to 12 years, probably 10 actively playing with 2 to 3 sort of on the fringes while I took a break to complete my graduate education in law. As you all know, the Barony had a Dropbox and encouraged participants to send in questions for the prospective baronial heads to respond to. And we are here today to provide our answers for those questions in hopes that you'll have a better understanding of our vision and what we would like to bring to the baronial coronet seat. To that end, Perronnelle, what are your ideas for encouraging recruitment of new members through demos or other recruitment opportunities?
So the SCA has its traditional, if you want to call them that, demos and recruitment methods, right? So obviously demos within the community at parks and things of that nature is kind of or should be a foregone conclusion. College campus outreach is a huge thing, and establishing those college campus groups can be a huge draw, especially here in Western Mass where we have so many of them. Local community sources are a great way also to do demos and things or activities with, libraries especially, and then reaching out to other associated groups or groups with like interests, things like archery clubs, fiber arts groups, even stores, fiber arts stores. They often will allow people to come in and do a demo of their particular thing, during a day that they might have an open store spot. So those are kind of the more traditional senses, but there are other ways to do recruitment as well.
Absolutely. I mean, in the last several years, non-traditional visibility opportunities have been key in recruitment. That's definitely an area we would like to kind of bolster up in the group. For example, the Malagentians up in Maine marched as a province in a parade. It was a great way to gain visibility. They got to interact with a whole new group of people from all ages, different walks of life, and it was just a great opportunity to be seen and express what we do. In the past, we've allowed BBM to hold sort of a demo at the Big E, and they've been happy to do it, and we appreciate that they've done it. I think it would also be a great opportunity for us to perhaps consider cost sharing in a manner where we can reach a larger audience and both groups can benefit from that. As far as the younger demographic is concerned, we could maybe find a way to participate in local trunk or treats, or maybe some of the local youth activities have space for merchants or tenting, those sorts of things. We're not looking to pander or focus entirely on children, but this is a family hobby, and so encouraging teens and children and finding things that get them going or keep them engaged is important as well.
Absolutely.
So the second question is multi-pronged, as are many of the questions in this recording. Sometimes even 3. So Perronnelle, what are your ideas for developing the Bergenthal community and traditions?
So Bergenthal is a barony that has a lot of fun traditions and is rich with its history. And it's really important that we appreciate that. But I think it's also equally important to be cognizant and creative in our adaptability.
Absolutely.
And to keep things fresh and very inclusive, right? We have to be open to new ideas and opportunities to create new traditions and keep things interesting for everyone, those who are new and those who have been in the game for longer. I think it's also important to have more children's activities than we've had in the past. That definitely has gone a little downhill. And teen programs, because obviously if the parents feel like their kids are welcomed, they're going to feel more comfortable coming to an event rather than feeling like they have to, or their kids are going to have to be left at home. So definitely having that. And it's, obviously the chancellor minor is not a babysitting position, but at least family engagement, right?
Absolutely.
All around family engagement is really something that we would like to see more of, for
Right.
sure.
And it doesn't necessarily speak particularly to recruitment, but definitely to retention. Children and younger individuals, they're our future. So why wouldn't we want to reach out in a way that's attractive to them to keep them coming back?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but in 10 years, I'm probably going to want to step back and let somebody else do some of the heavy lifting. So the second portion of this particular question speaks to encouraging people let's see, how do you plan to get us working together at events and retaining members who join? To my thought process, if you encourage people to tap into their passions, joy and passion are infectious, not in a negative way, like, for example, the pandemic, but in sort of the more, if you're having fun, everyone around you is more likely to have fun. It might not be their particular cup of tea, whatever it is that you're doing, but a positive disposition and demeanor goes a really, really long way. And to that end, we would also like to encourage folks to identify their strengths. And that would also help us guide them to step into roles and tasks that are suited to their strengths and skill sets. Especially for the newcomers, maybe folks who have taken a longer leave and are coming back to the game. We want to see you guys be with us. We want you to have fun with us. So we would like to find a way that you can be engaged and find something you like to do that taps into what your joy is and what your strengths are. Not necessarily finding a hole that needs filling and just kind of putting yourself there because it's there. We want to help you succeed as well.
Absolutely. And I think also retaining longtime members, it can be more difficult. We often talk about sometimes the older members aging out or getting burnout or, and I think it's because we often take too much on in our current roles. And I think part of the solution there is inquiring what from our longtime members, even those that have stepped away, like what was the thing that brought you back? What was the thing that kept you interested? And really tap into that and use that to our advantage.
Absolutely.
And I think the other part of that too is trying new, different, fun, challenging ideas, events, or creating different challenges at our events, getting the creativity juices flowing, and making things attractive and not always doing the same thing. So that way, when we do have the good oldies that we bring back, they're like, oh yeah, I did
events
this
and
thing.
Traditions, to be more specific.
Yes.
Not folks.
Yeah, not folks. Events and traditions. But the people who have stepped away, like, it's definitely, I think we need to talk to them and see what it is that keeps them coming back, and maybe offer them, like, hey, mentorships, if a specific thing. So,
and that actually leads pretty well into the next question. Again, another multiple part question. What suggestions do you have to bring local households and guilds back into the Mercantile Hive, as well as getting inactive households to resume playing with the barony? Perronnelle and I decided to answer this in kind of like a 1-2 punch fashion, where I'll address the first portion and she'll address the second question. So our barony is vast in geography, in interests, in experience levels, and amount of time we can all dedicate to this hobby we love so much. We feel that it's important to encourage households to host practices, events, demos, whichever one of those maybe is more feasible for your time capabilities. We also would like to see them participate in business meetings and invite them to take part in planning and execution of baronial events, tasks, and initiatives. We believe that starting at a small level, maybe getting you to dip your toe in here or there, is a great way to sort of see what's out there. And it might just be that hook that you need, that one little thing that keeps you coming back, maybe gives you a little bit more pride, not that we don't have any, but gives you that like sense of ownership a little bit more, where you want to see it succeed, not just because it's the local group and that's what what you feel like is expected of you, but when you're engaged, other people will want to be engaged.
Becoming a shareholder.
Yeah,
really,
kind of a community
yeah.
shareholder mentality.
Yeah.
We also think facilitating mentorships between the experienced folks in our group and the younger and newer Scadians is a great way to capitalize on the wealth of knowledge they represent. Maybe it's the thing that they're able to do to guide, to instruct, to share their experiences, and help kind of rekindle the relationship with what they love. Maybe give them an opportunity to be the person that they have solidified in their mind. Oh, when I first started, this person was awesome, and this and this thing were great about them, and that's what I loved. Kind of a way to honor what you know in your journey, but in a capacity that's comfortable and you're able to meet without feeling wrong.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, we don't mean like a formalized mentorship, like being a protege or apprentice necessarily,
Right.
but rather just a sharing of knowledge, like, hey, pointing people out and saying, these are people that you should ask questions of, and really having them, like, pairing them up in that particular sense.
Absolutely. And then the second prong of the question is also about how to get inactive households to resume playing with the barony.
Yeah, and that can be a little more difficult because our society it comes in cycles, right? We see it at practices and we
All
see
the
it at
time.
events. Things will reach highs and lows. And I think one of the big things that we need to stop doing, and even when we don't realize we do it subconsciously, is kind of this all or nothing mentality, where you're either in the SCA or you're not. And I think that's a huge thing of where we need to work on basically debunking that mentality and reaching out to those those individuals that may have stepped away and be like, listen, you used to do X, Y, and Z. I would really love your input on that. And we're looking on maybe putting a new spin on it, or and kind of reach out to them with that specific sort of mentality, or ask them for help for like a very small portion of a task. And I think that would be a great way to stop the loss of traditions and knowledge, because that's really just as important as recruitment, right? We want to keep our history. We have a baronial historian, and part of that is our traditions, and part of that is the knowledge base that we as a barony have acquired. So I think we need to stop that all or nothing mentality and really kind of let people play at the level or at the frequency that is healthy and good for them and makes them happy. So.
And that being said, burnout and taking on too much can come in various different shapes and sizes. I think the society as a whole and all local branches are working on navigating the post-pandemic reality of eventing. What does that look like for us? We all have fond memories of the things we used to do and the caliber of what kind of events we had run prior to the world shut down. So how do we manage that? How do we continue to honor the traditions and things that we used to do and love? How do we move on with events, that sort of thing? And that's pretty much about what the next question. So with pre-pandemic Bergenthal being known for hosting kingdom level events, what events run by the barony have you participated in planning or executing? And what are your ideas to return the barony to a prominent position in the kingdom without burning out our volunteer crews or taking a financial loss? Again, this is another one of those questions where Perronnelle and I are each going to kind of take a little piece. I think we're first going to address the events that we've either run or participated in, and then we will move on to the other half.
Absolutely. Yeah, personally, I was an autocrat for Nova Scola twice. Summer Draw, I've been an autocrat for. Yule, I've also was a co-autocrat for Hastelud this past fall. I've also taught at Nova Scola several times. And I've also helped in the kitchen and at gate for a number of events. So I'm always around and loitering in underfoot in general.
In helpful ways, loitering in helpful ways. I too have autocrated Novice Schola in Crown Tournament. I've not autocrated Yule, but I have taken part in helping coordinate the feast and run day board in some capacity, the senior event staff. I've also worked gate and various tasks as needed for most of the Baronial events. Much like Perronnelle, I'm most always around and underfoot in the helpful ways.
In a good way.
Admittedly, I've only just recently stepped into teaching. I feel like imposter syndrome is a thing some folks may have, and I know for myself that is definitely a thing that I have dealt with. So I'm beginning my journeys in teaching while figuring out what it is that I feel confident in teaching in a way that folks can hear and use to their benefit as well.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to the second part, which is, how do we do the same caliber of events that we used to do pre-pandemic? And I think on that end, we have to be slightly more business oriented and a little bit more, not mercenary, but a little more exact in the cost and analysis of our events, because quite obviously we've seen it in our own personal finances. Everything's gone up in cost. Sites have gone up, food has gone up, everything has gone up in cost, and
gas has gone up.
Gas is, yeah. We need to be more realistic, I think, when it comes to crunching numbers for event quotes. We can't really afford to put up the same caliber of event for the same budget that we had
in the
past. That's just unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
And if we try to do that, we're going to be setting up ourselves for failure. Mm-hmm. I think that we need to, if it means a reduction in events and doing fewer but quality events so that we keep that caliber, then maybe that's what we have to look at. Also, collaborating with neighboring groups can help the overall burden on our own wallet, and also to help bolster and volunteer our volunteer corps and prevent burnout. Like it's all of that, like the cost sharing aspect as well is important. Right. So because we're not the only barony in this situation.
Definitely not the only game in town.
No.
And along those lines, I think taking a strategic planning sort of mentality to things when it comes to event planning. Not every event needs to be a Kingdom event or Royal Progress. But when we do those kinds of events, I think that would be a great opportunity to host a Kingdom event and maybe couple it with one of our traditional events or traditional tourneys. Crestfallen is a great example. That used to be it's super fun. It encourages creativity. The fighters have fun. The crowd gets really into it. How can we bring stuff like that back, but also maximize kind of what we're getting back in terms of fun and enjoyment with minimal cost differential? And so I think in addition to the obvious benefit with finances, when you do something like that, you're also putting forward a fun, maybe new thing that somebody else hasn't seen. To us, it's near and dear, but it's a great way to show everybody else in the known world, like, hey, this is what we do. Or maybe, okay, the known world is a little bit big, but other folks in the Kingdom who are coming out to an RP or a Kingdom event might see this thing, and it could definitely encourage them to come back, try new things, if nothing else, facilitate a new relationship, and keep those sorts of fun juices flowing. I have no doubt in my mind that every group is struggling with some amount of how do we do what we used to do before the pandemic, but not go bust, either financially or with volunteer support. And across the board, volunteerism has been down since we've come back from the pandemic, regardless of the reason. Other things that we think would be really, really great to tap into would be maybe formal invitations to other baronial heads, or for groups that aren't baronies, maybe to the greater officers, subject matter experts that an event is geared towards. So for example, like our tournaments, or maybe thrown weapons tournaments, those sorts of things. Why don't we do the best we can? It might just be as simple as asking somebody to come. Folks in the SCA are well known for their desire to give back, their want to play, their joy in playing. let's make that work for us. And also, as it happens, our current highnesses live next door. That's a great way to get more folks to come out. It's a great way to encourage, cross group interaction. It's a great way to provide our officers an opportunity to talk with officers of a neighboring group, and maybe kind of have some collaboration and discuss, what's a problem, how are you addressing some of your struggles. These are all opportunities that we would love to see y'all take, and we would love to help create.
Absolutely. So the next question is that also deals with officers, and it's how would we like to address issues like officer retention or officer burnout. So again, this is a two-parter. And then second part, do you think we should set term limits for officers or reduce the term limits of officers and or the coronets? So I will take the first hit on this one. So as far as addressing issues like officer retention and officer burnout.
You're talking with your hands, and Maverick has decided he would like some attention.
I'm sorry.
This is my little fur buddy, and he will forever be part of me.
And basically, Marian and I are on the same page. And if we were to be selected as the next coronets, then we would definitely want to implement an open door policy, and even set up business hours either at events or virtually, and so that we're open and available, and where to find us, and open to discussion for helping officers, whether it's finding resources or event stewards, want to talk or what have you. We definitely would love to encourage deputies. We've said that before, have deputies for our officers so that the officers can step down and they feel comfortable doing that, because I've been an officer and sometimes you feel guilty when you need to step down if there's no one there to step up to take your place, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's not something that we all like to, talk about, but definitely it might just be a me thing, but I definitely feel a little bit guilty if I have to leave an office and there's no one there to replace me. Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. So, and also if they have a deputy in place, then they can have adequate time to teach them, and it's not having to reinvent the wheel every single time a new officer steps in. Uh-huh. So, and I think the other thing that would be really important was do like an online, not a bio, but maybe like a little job description with a picture of the person who's the officer, and do it in layman's terms. Like if you've been in the society for a hot second, you start learning some of the SCA jargon, right? So, but not everybody is in the know. So we would like to, have it in layman's terms. And so that way, someone who's newer to the group or what have you will be like, oh, okay, this is this required skill set. I can do that.
Oh, hey, maybe this is how much time, not at events, it will take. Can I manage this amount of time in my non-eventing space? Is that something I can do?
Yeah. Because that's the other thing too, is a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know, that seems like a lot of work. And not all of the offices take large amounts of time, right? So on a day-to-day basis anyways. As far as the coronet term is considered, that right now is governed by EK law, right? So it's the initial 3-year with another 3-year extension. Vote of confidence is needed from the baronial officers, and all that sort of stuff. But I would hesitate to futz with that too much, simply because we don't have our bylaws in yet.
I think what Perronnelle is getting at is that we want to make sure we can fine tune our bylaws to best function for the group. We have them. I think we're just looking to kind of hone in on them and get them in a tangible copy that's easily accessible to the most people before we go sort of, for lack of better words, futzing around with, further restricting what the kingdom already governs.
Correct. Thank you. And then the other part of that too is I think it's important to, and we both do, we've talked about it actually, is having like a wellness summit or an annual vision meeting in a business office is what you would call it, with the greater officers, right? And have that, so that, okay, this is what we would like to see this year. These are our goals. And so that way, if things start to go, a greater officer might be like, hey, we wanted to do X, Y, and Z. It's holding us accountable, but also it's kind of like that check-in for health reasons. Like, hey,
Absolutely.
like, this is where we're at. And it's open communication, because
Right.
that is the most important thing.
And it's also a great way to kind of tap into an annual or yearly, okay, this is what we did last year. What were some of our weak points? Where can we improve? What can we do maybe to not be in that same particular boat with only one oar? Again, moving forward. Foresight is great. Hindsight can be even better for learning and improving opportunities.
Absolutely. So, but that goes into officer term limits.
It sure does. Great point. Thank you, Perronnelle. Again, officer term limits are a bit hard to address, simply for the fact that each individual is unique and has different capabilities, especially when coupled with the differing sort of time commitments and skill sets needed for each office. So we are aware that officer burnout is a thing. Again, as Perronnelle said, having deputies and encouraging other people to do smaller parts of an event is a great way to sort of start getting them in the mindset, oh, hey, I did that thing. I can do that thing again. Oh, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Maybe what else can I do? Like, I'm comfortable adding maybe one or two more Legos to this particular set. We'll get to a castle eventually, right? We want to do what we can to help you guys. If we win, of course. Officer retention and burnout is, again, across the board a problem. What part of what we would like to see people do is reach outside of your usual go-to crew. Hey, I know this person, I've worked with this person 100 times, they've got this, and that's great. And there's absolutely a place for that. That's sort of more that experience and in-depth knowledge of things. We want to encourage people to reach out to somebody else and help draw them in, maybe take them under your wing. Again, not formal, doesn't need to be like a colored belt situation for new folks, like a peer-dependent relationship. It could be as simple as, oh, hey, I see you over there doing that thing and you're doing it really well. You want to come over here and help me work on this too? Or, hey, that thing could go really well over here. Would you mind working together? Little simple ways to change things, and implementing the open door policy. That's what we've come to think about it. Mm-hmm. For open communication is important with greater officers, lesser officers, and the populace as a whole. We want to make sure that we have a safe space for conversations. In short, we need you to help us help you. We can't help you with a problem if we don't know that you have it. And we want to be that source of support. But we need you to talk to us and let us in to help you accomplish the goals. Much as we might like to think any particular office can sort of step in, with a magic wand and make everything better, that unfortunately is not quite how things work. But we're happy to help you work through things and plan, maybe figure out a better way to come at the problem, or maybe we'll have some feedback or know who to point you at that could help you with whatever it is you're having as an issue. And as far as officer bios on the website, like Perronnelle had started to discuss, they don't have to be anything exhausted. Hey, this is me. This is the station that I have. We would really like to see that accompanied by a recent picture. That would be really helpful for newbies or newcomers. More PC. I apologize. That's unfortunately not always my strong suit. I'm working on it. And that would also help encourage transparencies in the offices and duties. And we believe that would also help, with people being able to sort of cycle through and step down without feeling guilty. Mm-hmm. In the alternative, while we're working towards putting those pieces in place, we need you to communicate with us. As soon as you start to identify the beginning of burnout, right? We can help you try to get in front of the thing. All too often, and I am notoriously bad at asking for help.
Pot kettle. I know.
but that's part of the open door policy. And I think we've also agreed that we would like to make sure that the open door policy is a thing that folks are aware of. I personally would like to see it in a non-event space where maybe there's a little bit more control, a little bit more anonymity. Oof, big word, anonymity. So that folks can feel encouraged to reach out, but maybe not feel like they're under scrutiny or on a public forum. And definitely, please don't do that during a business meeting. The business meeting dockets are already extremely busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So I guess the next question is, what is something unique you can bring to the Coronettes? Part 1. Part 2, what does the role of Baron and Baroness mean to you when it comes to engaging with the community or with the officers?
So we believe we all bring unique things to the table, courtesy of life experiences. Everybody comes from someplace different, has different experiences, different perspectives, has had different struggles, which help play into all of these things. And we could talk about the length of time we've spent in the SCA and in our game, interests and accomplishments, but these are shared among many of us. So I think what makes us all unique is our perspective and how we approach situations, courtesy of our life experiences.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So myself, like my background is I'm a first generation immigrant who spoke no English when I came to the United States. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. Prior to that, I'd worked in the entertainment industry. I taught at a college at Lesley University. I was their technical director, worked in their theater department. I have worked in schools since, 6th grade and all the way up through college, So I have had many jobs and things like that over time. And basically what it comes down to is I'm very much a customer service orientated person. Like those skills are ingrained, they are in me, and I can't leave them behind even if I wanted to. I have a passion for theater, and so surprising. I have worked with the known world players at Penzic for the past so many years, and part of theater is problem-solving skills. You have to get creative with some of your problem-solving skills. And it's more than the duct tape and WD-40 sort of problem-solving skills that we're talking about. So I like to think outside of the box for that. I also multitask, somewhat of a fiend at that. I can't seem to do one thing by itself ever. So again, none of those things are really unique, but it's really my life experiences and how I've had situations and things, and for everybody else as well, that makes those things and how I solve and approach those situations, and how I see through that lens that's unique. So that's my go. So
I myself spent 12 years in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. 8 of those years were in a supervisory capacity as an NCO. I know this is not paramilitary, but there are a couple things that I feel like worked really, really well there that I would really like to bring to our group. And that is sort of the 30, 60, 90-day planning model, or maybe even 60, 90, 120. Short-term way to long-term success is how I try to think about it. What's on our radar immediately? I feel like it will help us prioritize and sort of stay on track and keep things moving. In addition, after action reviews, or I think a lot of people who have played in years past probably might call it like a post-mortem event meeting. I think those are key to adapting and evolving and getting better and more streamlined, so that we're not recreating a wheel that's already exists, or maybe helps us hone in on our procedures just a little bit. And so I would love to see more of those. Maybe on, a link we could have a bio, or maybe not a bio, like a blog about, just to keep a written record of these things. Sometimes I find having just an archive to look at, what have future generations done? What did they find helpful? Can I apply any of that to where I am?
Past generations.
Yes, I apologize. Past generations. What did they do? And how can I benefit from the lessons they learned instead of banging my head against the wall and learning it for myself.
Not recommended.
And in addition to that, I do have a formal collegiate education in business management and legal education. I tend to come at things from a sort of structured, more analytic-driven perspective. And as much as I would love to divorce the fact that I see liability all over the place every day, it's probably a thing that it can definitely be beneficial. And I apologize in advance. You're probably going to get sick of hearing me say that. But it's a thing. How do we plan? How do we make sure this is as safe as possible? How do we make sure everyone's happy and safe and wants to come back?
Absolutely. Part two of that question is how we relate to the role of the coronets, right? So personally, I see through a theater lens. So I see the coronets as an actor or actors, and the seneschal is the director, and then the production team is the greater officers, right? So the production team and the director do 90% of the work, really. And then the coronets or the actors would be the face of the game, and they do about 10%, give or take. And for that and how the coronets engage with people, it's really a public relations job. Absolutely. Being approachable, welcoming, service driven, and really I think having a strong customer service base is really key for that, because you're the face of the game as far as that's concerned. So
absolutely. My vision and the lens that I see that through is sort of prior service. So the coronets, in my mind, are the game side visual presence and piece of pomp and pageantry. And it's our job to be with you and help propel you and help advocate for you. And the officers, the greater officers and lesser officers, y'all are the backbone of the group, kind of like the Corps of NCOs in the military. So that's how I see that. And then the next question gets into current, like the length of the current baronial terms, goals for the coronet, and what are your goals for the first 3 years with the coronets. So in kind of going with that 30, 60, 90 planning mindset, there's sort of the short-term goals, and then there's the longer-term goals, and they lead really nicely into each other. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So in the first year, really our primary focus, we've discussed it and we've said it in this particular video a couple of times now, is setting up demos to invigorate the group and get new members. Personally, I would love to see 2 demos a year. If we could get more, great. But for the first year, if we could establish 2 demos that we could do recurring every year, I think that'd be really fantastic. As far as addressing the lowered attendance of practices, I think would be paramount as well. And because we want to be fiscally responsible, again, the cost of things is going up and up and up, right? So we need to at least break even on our practices. And a lot of times, I hate to say it, but our practices have been drawing very few people, and we have more people hanging out and doing art than we do fighting and doing other things. And it's not breaking even most times at this particular point. So addressing this so that we don't continuously have this problem, I think would be high on our priority list for the first year. And personally, I think that's really important. So,
yeah. And then kind of our longer term 3-year snapshot, if you will, again, builds off the first year's goals. So I'm not going to repeat any of those. But we definitely want to make sure we have the officer pages up with the write-ups of what each office entails, those little bios that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We want to work on having a better documented process in place for future event stewards, and have this readily accessible on our website. Again, efficiency and time management and spoon management. Let's learn from what we've done previous, and keep building on that. I would also love to see baronial pageantry kind of take a step up at events, and more youth, teen, inclusive activities at our events. They do not have to be mutually exclusive.
No.
They can be intertwined. Pageantry and presence and pomp, it all creates the atmosphere. And if the atmosphere sort of reflects the joy that we all have in our hobby, I think that will help folks kind of get more into the spirit again, relight that fire if if, maybe the pandemic sort of dimmed it a little bit. And all of these things together, I believe, will help getting officers working together more efficiently with transparency. It'll help in getting deputies for each office and increasing recruitment and retention too, because the more information there is, the better able folks will be to identify if they can help in a certain capacity. What can I do? What is something that I feel like I can do? I don't want to let anyone down. I don't want to let myself down. Why are we're causing more anxiety for ourselves? There's enough of that in the world. So our goal is to kind of try and do what we can to help alleviate some of that at the front rather than on the back end of things.
All right, and I guess the next...
We already touched on the practice piece.
We already did touch a bit on this one. So how would we deal with dwindling practices and meetings? So practices, I guess I'll jump in on that one. Post-pandemic, we've lost a good number of people. We used to have a dozen fencers at least, and at least a half dozen to 10 or so heavy fighters. Heavy fighters, and that regularly attend our practices. Now we've frittered down to maybe 2 or 3 fencers at best, and then a half dozen people that come to do hang out and talk and art and stuff. So it's definitely gone down as far as attendance is concerned. And I think the reasons vary, obviously, from proximity to conflicting practices that are just sometimes closer to people. I think also
just real life.
And real life.
It all kind of plays in together. So it's really hard to isolate things and talk about them in one vein.
In one vein or one specific cause, right? I think we need to look at the needs of the barony personally. Maybe moving the practice to a slightly different location, or maybe, 15 minutes north of our location, it might be beneficial. People might be more drawn to that.
Maybe even like a rotating set, 4-week schedule. Yes, we're aware some months have 5 weeks, but you can plan for the shorter and kind of adjust fire with that 5th week, or help spread. Or like we said previous, our group is large in people and in geography. And I feel like the rotation might be a way to maybe address some of the proximity concerns.
Absolutely. And we also, could look out to BBM. BBM doesn't currently have a practice, so maybe trying to get together with them and maybe hosting one right over the border in Enfield together might be beneficial for those fighters in BBM that don't want to travel all that far. Just a thought, but go ahead. You can...
Absolutely. And again, I guess that's that segues nicely into strategic planning. Strategic planning. In a time where time and finances are sort of being stretched pretty far, let's do what we can to make them work best for us. For example, there's the Cheshire contingent. There's an Ashfield and Greenfield contingent. There's sort of what used to be the active corps, which is the greater Springfield area. And even that has kind of gotten a little bit smaller. So rather than continuing to keep everything perhaps in Springfield, maybe it's time we, look at shifting priorities. And as far as the fighter practice, I know it's a bit of a bone of contention, but perhaps it's time to consider renaming the fighter practice. Not everything needs to or should be fighter centric. Come at me, I will die on that hill. I love it. In the past, we've had huge amounts of fighters, homegrown, if you will, from Bergenthal. We do still have a good core of them, but we also have a significant number of artisans and service-minded individuals, and it's okay to share the cookie.
Yep. But I think that's renaming that has always been kind of a thing. And it doesn't have to be renaming all of the practices, but maybe just renaming our Wednesday practice as a general gathering space.
Or maybe fighter practice and commons.
Oh,
could we make everyone happy? That's impossible.
But we try. We try, right? Like it's one of those things that is important to us, and we want to make sure everyone feels included and invited. So,
and that actually segues us really neatly into the next question: how do we plan to stay in touch with the populace and adapt our goals to encourage the interests of the population. Communication. Big piece, big piece. Office hours, like we have said, those kind of go. Office hours, open door policy, not quite one and the same, but again, with that overlapping idea. If at all possible, we would love to be able to host virtual office hours, and at events as possible. Again, we're very cognizant. Event time is definitely at a premium.
Absolutely,
for us individually as a potential pair of titular heads, and I'm sure for each of you, we all have fun things we want to do. So how can we strike that balance? Accessibility and availability without just adding another thing to frantically run from one task to another.
We don't do that.
Yeah. And so one of the things we had discussed and we think would be helpful would be a Baronial Dropbox or suggestion box link on the website for additional accessibility. It's, in my mind, probably the closest thing we could get to a balance where when you've got a moment, if you have something to say, you can hop online. We're aware that that might actually take a little bit more time on our parts behind the scenes, but we want to make sure that we're here for you. And if that's what works best for you, less anxiety, maybe a little bit more efficiency, we would love to help make that happen.
Whatever is easiest, yeah, for sure. And we also said for us also doing a short blog post maybe once a month. Not anything ginormous, not anything large and newsletter worthy, but a small sort of like, this is what the status is, this is where we're at sort of thing, and just keep it like maybe 1 to 2 paragraphs long. I think
pictures are our friends. They help tell a story without words too.
Correct. I think also the second part of that is being flexible in this type of position it's absolutely necessary, mandatory. Like, we are here for the populace, and while we have things that we would love to see happen, that we have identified as areas of need or ideas for improvement or growth or what have you, the concerns of the populace definitely trump those. If there's a way to merge those things, then by all means, we would love to look for those solutions first. I believe the interest, and we believe the interest of the populace drives the group and should be addressed for the health of the group. And that's really kind of paramount.
Right. And again, this leads us, how lovely, into the next question about whether either one or both of us have any worries about financial or mundane commitments interfering with our duties to attend baronial events or represent the barony to the kingdom. We both feel strongly that real life comes first for everyone, period, full stop.
Full stop.
We also both feel quite strongly that attendance at events such as coronation, investiture, and kingdom tournaments or competitions where Bergentali populace are competing is a very, very high priority. And I guess that kind of points back to the question about sort of how we see the role as the coronets versus officers. And so it's our job to help if in the event, let me rephrase, it is the titular head's job to help advocate and advance the folks in their group and to help buoy you all when you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess this is where we're going to split a little bit. And for myself, I'm going to say, real life does come first. I have a family, my kids that play, but, and my family will always be my first priority. My kids will be their first priority. But I believe that Marian and I are kind of ideally situated in terms of this because we've kind of looked at it as sort of a divide and conquer sort of strategy. If I can't be there, she can be there. And likewise, if she has a family commitment, I can be there. And that works in the benefit for the barony, because then while we might not both be there, Bergenthal will be represented. I do have mundane commitments, but for the past dozen years, I've been able to balance my family, direct shows, coach volleyball, and with
still help plan events and do all the things with many hats.
and with little to no impact on my SCA life. Like I'm very cognizant of how many spoons, if we're going on spoon theory, how many spoons and time and things and resources that I have personally.
Maverick has opinions.
Maverick has opinions. Right. And but I think that we can absolutely work on, that it's not a big concern in my mind, because I've been able to get through all of that. Being pregnant in the SCA, I've been staff at Penzic with a 3-month-old baby. If I can do that, I figure I can do anything else that comes my way.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. And as far as I'm concerned, I am currently the EK Troubadour Herald. For those of you that don't know, that's the Kingdom list tournament herald. That does require my attendance at Crown Tournament and most Kingdom Champion events. However, I do have 2 deputies currently, one in the north and one in the central region. I'm hoping to recruit a southern region deputy, and that gives me a little bit of flexibility. Again, the divide and conquer strategy that we've talked about, you might not get both of us, but one of us will most certainly be somewhere. While it would be ideal to have both of us at each event, sometimes that's just not possible. But because there are two of us, we feel strongly that we would be able to provide a more vast presence, including to other groups. For example, if Perronnelle and I were elected to be a titular head, we've discussed the divide and conquer strategy. Part of the divide and conquer strategy is to strive to promote and foster growth and lasting relationships throughout the kingdom for the benefit of Bergenthal and its populace.
Absolutely.
For example, this year at Penzic, we are co-hosting the Runnymede Dinner with Carillion in New Jersey, right? So we want to do as best as we can to help y'all reach your goals and continue to grow the group as is appropriate for the group and the current interests that are currently available.
Yeah.
And that being said, at least from my perspective, as far as finances are concerned, much like Perronnelle, I've been balancing, a hot many interests for well over a decade, and having a doggo and attending events both near and far, and I've been able to manage that by implementing a budget. And so I don't foresee any of those particular duties or tasks as a barrier to what I consider to be the duties of a titular head.
Yeah, no, neither do I. Financially, like I've always done a budget, and that's something that I've always done and I continue to do. And I understand what my limits are and where my things are. And I think we're good on that. I have no concerns about being a financial situation coming into play. So at that point, I think that's the last question. Let's see.
Woohoo!
We've reached the end.
Yeah, thanks for cutting us off. Thank you all for tuning in. It was wonderful to take the time and address some of these points with you.
Yeah, and it's absolutely our pleasure to answer these questions. And again, if you see us anywhere or you happen to hear a noisy dog, go ahead and reach out to us if you have additional questions that you'd like to have us answer. We'd be happy to, answer those at any point in time. Stop us and we're happy to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. And as one final closing remark, Perronnelle and I are happy to run. We wish the best of luck to the other couple, and however the election plays out, we'll continue to be present and work with the barony as we have, with joy and smiles on our faces.
Absolutely. So take care, everybody, and thank you very much for all your time.
Bye.